Time to talk about diminishing returns, because a lot of people don't really understand it. Roll it. Alright, welcome back. Thanks for being in my channel. If you want to like, subscribe, and share, feel free to do so. And you can also become a member if you like my content and want to support me. It starts from $1 and it goes all the way up to other dollars. Up to you. Now, back to the subject of diminishing returns. But first, a bit of history. Diminishing returns is a concept that originally comes from economics. It has many factors which we aren't going to get into detail about, but it boils down to this. When you have a system with a lot of factors and you keep increasing just one of them, you get to a point where adding more of that thing does not give you back as much benefit as the amount used to, because of the knock-on effects of those previous increases on the other factors involved. Now, enough of that. We don't want anybody's brain to dribble out of their ears. The label diminishing returns escaped from economics and started getting used in more everyday ways. An example that a lot of folk can relate to is their car. You spend money on it to keep it running, fresh oil, new brake pads, new tires, stuff like that, and you have the reasonable expectation that that is going to give you the benefit of your car remaining in good working order for at least another year. Now, every car gets to a point in its life where you can spend and spend and spend, and there's still something else that needs fixing. Do you see where we're going with this? Same amount of money spent later does not get you the same amount of good working order for your car. This is a real life example of diminishing returns in action. Now let's look at diminishing returns in Neverwinter. There's a few nice obvious cases of genuine diminishing returns that we can look at. First is Warlord's Inspiration. You put in 3 insignias and your active striker companion does 8% more damage. If you equip it on a second mount, you'll be putting in the same amount of insignias as the first one, but only get half as much companion damage buff. And if you were to equip a third one, it reduces even more. The same amount of insignias going in and only a quarter of the amount of benefit going out. And then there's Pack Tactics. When one member of the party equips this mount equip power, everyone gets 2,250 extra combat advantage and awareness. If a second member equips it too, the second one only gives 1,125 extra stat points, and so on. But if 5 were to equip it, the 5th one would only get 140 extra stat points. From here on, it gets more tricky because we are getting into the realms of math.
Come on, do math.
But here's a joke to lighten the mood, or not a joke, whatever. When are diminishing returns not diminishing returns? Well, it's basically when they are mistaken as expectations. And what in the holy hockey sticks are those, you might ask? Bear with me on this one. Here we go. In some cases, the sums that happen in the background of the game do something different to what the player thinks they will do, and the difference is assumed to be a diminishing return situation. When people add something to their builds, they expect to get a certain amount of benefit as a result, but their expectations are sometimes more than what they actually get. This difference between expected benefit and actual gain is sometimes labeled as diminishing returns too. Sometimes there are other factors to the change that the player didn't include in their reckoning, so the overall benefit of the change is less than they thought it would be. Also, there are occasions where the phrase gets misused as a way of avoiding explaining what actually happens in the background sums. Now let's look at some simplified examples to help us get our heads around those ideas. Bonus damage is a thing that is very close to all damage dealers' hearts, so we will use that here, but it's not the only thing that can have diminishing returns. Example 1. Here's what a lot of people think happens. You have your base damage, 10% of your total item level, modified for your roll, yada yada yada. That's the red part. And then you get something that gives you 10% additional damage, and that's the green part. Now, before you get all excited about what bits of gear give 10%, this is just for the example. Next, you get something else that gives you another 10% additional damage. A lot of folks do the reckoning on their increased base damage, and that looks something like this. If you add another piece of gear with 10% additional damage and keep using the same erroneous method, it looks like this. After 3 increases based on enhanced values, you can see there's an extra little bit. Now here's what actually happens. You've got exactly the same base damage in the red bit, and one part of 10% additional damage. That's the blue this time. And when you add another piece of gear that gives you 10% additional damage, that is also calculated on your base damage, completely ignoring the 10% you already have. And here's with the third piece. Now you can see the difference between what a person might be expecting and what they are actually getting. That difference between expected benefit and actual gain is one thing that sometimes gets written off as diminishing returns. Of course, this isn't really diminishing returns, it's just not knowing what the sums really do. Next example, and we'll use base damage again. You'll recognize our starting point. Base damage in red, and 10% additional damage is going to be in gold for this one. So when people are trying to work out how much extra benefit they actually got from the 10% damage doodad, they compare it to the damage before they put it on, which is fine when it's the first one. 10% is 10%, nice and tidy. But then they get another doodad that gives another 10%. Now here's where it starts getting a little bit messy. Each doodad still really does give you additional damage at 10% of your base damage. But when you start doing comparisons, the method is to compare before and after values. So once you already have doodad 1 equipped and are comparing the effects of doodad 2, the value you're comparing it to is different because of the effects of doodad 1. This means that the increase in damage from adding doodad 2 looks like 9.0.9% instead of 10% because it's being compared to the enhanced base damage rather than the base damage on its own. And the more doodads you add, the smaller the increase of the next one appears to be, because the enhanced value it's being compared against is getting bigger each time. Now the number crunching purists in Windowlicker land will be shouting that's not diminishing returns either. And in the most technical persnickety way, they are right. But it is close enough to the principle that this is how the term has come to be used in the context of computer games, where the percentage value of the actual damage gained from a change, when compared to the previous damage total, appears less than the percentage value of the change. And lastly, why do we even care about diminishing returns? Well, to be honest, a lot of players don't. They just want to enjoy playing the game, doing whichever bits of content they find most fun. And when they do get a new piece of gear, as long as equipping it takes their stats in a better direction to what it previously was, then they are pleased, which is also absolutely fine. But if you want to understand where all your damage comes from down to the subatomic level, or be able to tell before grinding for a few weeks to get that brand new shiny object of your desire what the effect of equipping it will be, then the maths and the language used to describe the maths becomes very important. So there you go. Diminishing returns for dummies. But if you disagree or see it a different way or have anything to add to this, feel free to add it in the comments. I just tried to simplify it for you so you could understand it a little bit easier. Anyways, more videos incoming. Galactic here. Peace out. Stay safe.